All right, everybody. Today I have a very, very special guest who I'm very excited to talk to. I have writer, director, and producer Kim Bass, who has worked and created such inspiring television series like Sister Sister, In Living Color, and Kenan and Kel, who's also written and directed such movies such as A Snowy Day in Oakland and Tyler's Run. Kim, want to take it away?
Yeah, well, thank you. No, it's really a pleasure to be with you today, and I appreciate that. Uh, so yeah, you mentioned some things that have been very enjoyable in my life, and certainly I've had the good fortune of living out my childhood dream, actually coming to Hollywood, working in television, filmmaking as well. And you mentioned, I think, Sister Sister right off the top. That actually was inspired by my twin sisters. So I have twin sisters, Janice and Joyce, older, a year and a half older than I am. And so I was very familiar with that whole twin thing, that twin magic. And so that was an easy show. And then you mentioned Kenan and Kel, which was actually inspired by my childhood with my best friend Tyrone. And so, people say write what you know. And so those two shows were, inspired by sort of childhood experiences. And so, true to form, if you do write things that you know well, you can't help but put a lot of love and care into those creations.
I mean, there's no real better way to put how it feels to be a writer than to essentially bring up the phrase write what you know. And I love the fact that you brought up what inspired you to write, like and create Sister Sister, Kenan and Kel. Um, and those were, for those of you who grew up in the 90s, those were huge, huge shows in the 90s. So I would like to know, what did it take to get those shows greenlit at the time? Because I can't imagine it was easy.
Well, let's see. It wasn't all that difficult.
Oh,
Once you get the meetings, right? And if you have something that people can see right away, there's immediate interest. So I'll tell you about, let's start with Sister Sister. That pitch took place at a restaurant with executives from Paramount Studios and pitched the idea. And before dessert hit the table, they already told me they wanted to do a deal on it. The executive said, I can see that this is going to go all the way to syndication, just based on the concept and your pitch. And so it was literally that one lunch. And then once we did what's called an if come deal, worked on the pitch, worked on it a bit. I had already met the twins, so it was actually created for T and Tamara Mowry because I had already met them. And make a long story short, we ended up pitching it to the execs at ABC with myself and the twins in the room. And lo and behold, after I left the meeting, I was in the garage and the phone rang. That's before people had cell phones. They had cell phones in your car. The phone rang in my car. And before I even pulled out of the garage, my agent called and said they bought the show in the room. So it went pretty smoothly. And then you have to write the pilot, and then the pilot gets shown to the ad folks in New York, and pilot was picked up. And next thing you know, Sister Sister was on the air. Did a season and a half on ABC and then 4 seasons on the WB network.
Was there any differences between how the two networks handled Sister Sister? Because we've seen shows like Brooklyn Nine-Nine that went from NBC to Fox, or I think it was Fox to NBC, that had different sort of writing styles and different outputs when it came to how the shows were handled. So did you notice any differences between the two networks
No,
and Sister Sister?
no, it was seamless. They wanted that show, so they got that show. So the ball just kept rolling. There was no difference and no interruption in the creative aspect of the show.
And do you still remain in contact with the two stars? Maybe like a Christmas card or like just a phone call every once in a while?
Yes, we do. We stay in contact, and their mother was very instrumental. Darlene was their manager. So we talk, they give me their shout out sometimes through their mom and so on and so forth. And once in a while we run into each other in various places. And then of course Jack A. Harry with Tim Reed is there. Jack A is someone I stay in touch with. As a matter of fact, she was just in my latest film called A Snowy Day in Oakland, and Jack A did a beautiful overwork to be the mom of a little girl in the picture. So she really helped us out there. So it's nice to be able to call people with whom you've worked in the past and you have a good enough relationship that they can come in and do things with you going forward in your sort of future creative endeavors.
No, that's always a positive because sometimes with this business there can be working relationships and then there can be personal relationships and then you find a bit of both in other relationships. So it's nice to know that with at least a few of the people you've worked with, you're able to maintain that professionalism on top of that, close, like not I want to necessarily say familiar sort of bond, but something that can at least be said more than a friend. Um, but moving along, I'm actually kind of interested. You said that Sister Sister was based off of your experiences with your twin sisters. That is correct, right?
That is correct. Yes, my sisters, Janice and Joyce.
Did any of them ever give you like a little bit of like a, like what siblings do, give you a little bit of like a nudge, like, hey, that episode you just made, I remember when that happened. Like I remember that's ripped straight from our that's ripped straight from our life. You really pulled out for like you really pulled straight from us living together. Like did they ever give you calls about like I just watched your show? That's like why'd you bring that up?
Yeah, well, look, there are six of us, and I am not spared any of their criticisms, which comes along with their love and caring. I'm the brother, so they talk about things openly and honestly and tell me when I've gotten things right and tell me when I've gotten things wrong and give suggestions. And that runs the whole sort of gamut of all of my siblings. And that's what's fun about it. Out here in Hollywood, of course, you're a different person because people just know you through your work and what the kinds of things that you create. And so you sometimes have a persona which is foisted upon you. It's not, you might not really be that person, but that's what's foisted upon you. But as you know, we all have families, and when you go home, everybody just falls back into the role that they played growing up. So, it doesn't matter if you fly in from Hollywood. Now you're back home and you're fair game for everything.
It doesn't matter how much money you make. When you go back home, you are going to be like if you were the bottom of the barrel back home when you were young, you're going to be the bottom of the barrel when you visit, no matter what. So you're going to get a bit of heat regardless of where you are in your career. And I love hearing that.
Yeah, so it's all, but my family, everyone is funny, aunts, uncles, cousins included. So, going back home, going to family reunions, what have you, that's just a material gathering exercise for me. So it's like, yeah, oh, I can use that.
Oh my goodness. I really love hearing that. Um, but moving along to Kenan and Kel, because I know that I trust me, I grew up with a lot of people who loved Good Burger, who because it starred Kenan and Kel, and even referencing the show, like even Kenan and Kel was on at Nick at Night. And it was always a pleasure just to get a good laugh before going to bed. So I'm wondering what was the process for getting that show made like?
So I'll tell you a story probably no one has heard, which is I was invited to a birthday party, okay, for the stand-up comedian Sinbad. And we were working on a project together at Disney at the time. And his brother, also who managed him, Mark Atkins, threw a birthday party. And so I was invited to the birthday party, typical Hollywood little thing up in the Hollywood Hills. And Mark was kind enough to introduce me to a few folks, and he ended up introducing me to an executive for Nickelodeon. And when he made the introduction, the woman said to me, "Oh, you're Kim Bass?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "We've been looking for you." I said, "Looking for me? Why? Do I owe somebody money?" And she said, "No, we want you to create a show for us." And And I said, oh, well, okay. Why was I so hard to find? And she literally said, I thought you were an older white woman. And I said, well, I hate to disappoint. Here I am in the flesh. And we exchanged information. And a couple of months later, I was on a jet on my way to Orlando where they were shooting All That. I met Kenan and Kel, spent a couple of days with them. And then once I came back, I started working on a little something that ended up becoming Kenan and Kel, their sitcom. True story.
My goodness. Look, I get Kim Bass, you know, okay, that does sound like an elderly white woman's name, but that is, oh my goodness. I'm sorry for laughing a bit too hard at that. Um, but what I'm wondering, because you know, people that have sometimes created shows that usually stars nobodies, and then to, you know, see those nobodies become giant somebodies, what is it like, you know, because you worked with Kenan Thompson a bit in the 90s, and now to see him, you know, to star in the live action version of Fat Albert, and then, you know, even be probably one of SNL's longest running cast members. What does that feel like to you, basically seeing some kid you worked with in the 90s just grow up to essentially be a stand, like a, I don't want to say a symbol or something like that, but basically just a huge part of comedy just in general?
Well, I I wouldn't say it's a sense of pride, but not like a father's sense of pride. It's more of a, yeah, that makes sense because he's that talented. And so was Kel. Kel was and Kenan together, they were amazing. And when I watch Saturday Night Live and see Kenan, it brings a smile to my face. And when I watch the show, there's a morning show on Saturdays, I believe, with Kel Mitchell, he hosts it, and I love seeing him there. With it's a youth oriented thing with animals, and and I talk to him once in a while, and it just I guess sort of verifies the fact that the reason the execs wanted a show created for the both of them is because they were standout talents. And so the sort of metamorphosis that took place with the both of them, it just seems normal to me. It seems like the normal thing that should have happened. They had a great work ethic. They were both very talented, very funny, just like Tia and Tamara. It all just makes sense. So when I see them doing well, I'm happy for them, but I'm not surprised.
Oh, of course. You know, that's probably the best way I think you could have put it. It's not like, it's more along the lines of it makes sense. I agree, because you know, you see Kenan, you've seen his work, and you even see Kel's work as well. So just to see where they get to now, you know, it's like the logical next step.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. In Living Color was the same, working with Jim Carrey, working with Damon Wayans, working with, David Allen Greer and Tommy Davidson and all the rest. It just makes sense where they are today. Even Marlon and it just all makes sense. All that talent was there the whole time. I mean, they didn't reinvent themselves. They were introduced to an audience, and then they could sort of show their wares, and their wares were just comedic capabilities that were extraordinary and entertaining to the point where people just wanted more and more and more of them, and therefore they could transition to other projects and other shows and to just keep the ball rolling.
and I couldn't have put it better myself, especially after, you know, it's like, because people sometimes see like, oh, they got their big start, or or oh man, this is where they really hopped off. And it's like, well, yes, that's the case, but you're saying it like, oh, this one role was like, oh, this is like all that they had to offer. But from the way you're talking, it's like, I've always like, you've always seen that they had that talent, and so it was just a matter of, you always knew that they had it in them. It's just a matter of making sure more people saw that this talent that they had,
Yeah,
which I
that's
think
exactly
is
right.
rarely ever spoken out loud, at least in terms of the people that I've worked with. Um, Now, moving on to your film work, I actually would like to know, because I haven't had the chance to talk with people about this. So you have worked in both television, and you have worked as a writing director for film. Now, what would you say are the biggest differences, if you can try to sum it up, because Lord knows there's plenty. What is the key differences to young filmmakers who think that working in television and film are technically not too dissimilar?
Well, for me, I will say that the intense creative process and the control that comes with directing a film is different than television. Television is more by committee, even through the creative process, because you have the writers room, you have multiple writers, you have the executive producer, then all the scripts go up to the, to the suits in the big office. And so there's a lot of sort of sausage making that goes along with it. I'm not saying it's not a good thing, but it's different. It's, as I said, it's more of a creative team where everyone has a lot to say through the creative process. And what I find by doing a film, there's a team, there's a creative process, but ultimately it all gets put in the hands of the director. And then from there forward, it tends to be his or her vision. And you don't sit around and discuss every shot. You don't sit around and discuss the arc of that scene. That's all been done prior to going into production. And then all of a sudden it's your baby and you do what you need to do with it. And you get to do what you would like to do with it, which is what's exhilarating and interesting. But television is more immediate. You do your work on a Friday, and a week later, millions of people across the country are watching it. And if some of your scenes or your jokes or dramatic sort of instances become something that's talked about at the water cooler at someone's job, then you've done your job. And that's a lot of fun as well. That sort of immediacy of every week, there's the show, and your characters are evolving and you're entertaining people on a weekly basis, as opposed to taking a couple of years to put a film together and then eventually, getting it out there and getting the response. I mean, we're here today, talking about Tyson's Run, and that process started years ago. The writing and the putting the whole thing together, the funding and getting shooting the film, then post-production, and got to deal with COVID and and everything else, right? So, but it eventually gets there. And if I might segue, the fact that it was so well received in Latin America is very fulfilling, especially because of the reason it did so well. The film itself struck a chord, but how it was presented in Latin America, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, was one of the supporting characters, played by Claudia Zavallos. She actually is Peruvian, and the distribution company in Latin America happened to be a Peruvian-based distribution company. So they latched on to the fact that they had, quote unquote, a homegirl in here, a local person who had come to Hollywood and ended up in this movie that was released in the United States, and it's now coming to Latin America. So their marketing push, which I thought was brilliant, was, we're going to latch on to this supporting character because she's one of ours, and she happens to be very articulate, very attractive. And so they built their campaign around, come see this movie, and we have this Latina in the movie, and she plays a Peruvian Spanish teacher. And so with that push, people became so curious about it. It spread from Peru to all the other Latin countries, ended up in 500 theaters across Latin America. And now that it's streaming on Netflix, it's now number 8 globally on Netflix, driven by all this interest in Latin America, where millions and millions are watching it.
Which, by the way, if I may interject, go see Tyson's Run. I had the pleasure of watching it, and it's an honest to God feel-good story that honestly kind of leaves you feeling like you have the ability to be a better person, that you can achieve things that you may not think is possible. And even bringing up Claudia's role in that film, she's really good. So honestly, for those of you watching, go see it. It's worth your time, 100%.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate that. Yes, it was in the theaters here, limited release, March of 2022. and it's available DVD and all the other digital sort of places where you can acquire it. But it will begin streaming on Netflix here in the US on February 28th. So it's got some catching up to do as far as how it exploded in Latin America. But it's I appreciate that. It's a good picture. We've got, Major Dotson does a great job, and Roy Cochran and Amy Smart and Barkhad Abdi. They all stepped up and did a really good job. And it was fun to work on the picture. And as you know, the special part of it was that we got to work with Major, who is actually on the spectrum. And so it's not an actor pretending to be a young boy living with autism. When we shot the film, he was actually a 15-year-old boy who actually was living with autism. And so he only had to tap into his real world and portray, a character he knew extremely well. So.
And that's actually, there's a couple points I wanted to bring up when it came to Tyson's run, mainly Barkhad
Abdi.
Barkhad Abdi's performance, who, by the way, is just a stellar actor in general. His role in the film really kind of struck a chord with me, but we'll get to that in a bit. But Major, I honestly have to commend you and Major, because usually sometimes, if you depict autism or someone who's on the spectrum, sometimes you may have something like Forrest Gump, or you get something like I Am Sam, where sometimes it's a little over the top, I think is the best way I can describe it. So, considering I grew up with ADHD, which is on that same spectrum, one thing I really, really liked was that Major's performance was subtle, because that's the thing that a lot of people fail to realize. It's not always, just the most over the top, like, this person clearly has a mental disorder or a mental disability. Sometimes it's as simple as, just some mild OCD that's just very hidden under the surface. And Major's performance was so nuanced and so subtle. Like you watch it and he has autism, but it's played in such a way where it's believable. It's not a character. You feel that he's a person. And I would like to know, you said he was already on the spectrum. So what, did you and him sit down to further craft this role in a way that was really true intentioned and meaningful? What was the process behind it?
Well, first of all, his audition was tremendous. I was actually at home when the casting director, Lisa Hamill, gave me a call. And it was early in the process, but her words to me was that I found Tyson. She says, I know we have to see a lot of people, but I'm telling you, we're going to end up with this kid. And I think we saw, it was a few hundred young boys that we saw for the role. And she was right. His audition was extraordinary. And we were not told that he was on the spectrum when he auditioned. He was just the best actor for the role. And then the cream on top was that he's actually on the spectrum. And so it made sense. But he is playing a character. He doesn't play himself. He's playing a character. But since he knows what it is to live in a world in which you are on the spectrum and many are not, that what those interactions are like. And so he was able to draw upon his own life experiences in order to create this character. And we talked about what would be too much and then where we were going to dial back. But he did a lot of work before he came in for the audition. He had created a character that was really working, and so it was pretty easy to work with him. Absolutely. I mean, he's the autism aside, he is just a really great actor. He was on The Walking Dead. He's done other things. This wasn't like, oh, grab an autistic kid and stick him in a movie. It wasn't that. It was, we need a good actor. And he came along and he bested the whole group and he got the role. He earned it. from his, with his audition.
It's always nice to hear that, that someone was cast for their talent rather than for either who they are or what they are. So to hear that, it warms my heart. Um, but sorry, not but. So moving along, there's a line that I wanted to state, and I'm wondering, how did you come up with it? Because it's said a couple times throughout the movie, which is, well, maybe that's the reason that I need to go first, so that I can do it first, so that then you can learn from me. And I don't know what it was, but I've heard my father say something very similar, and it kind of, I don't know, it struck a chord with me. So I'm wondering, how did you come up with that line? Was it something that your own father said to you, or some friend or family?
Well, it's not exactly something that someone had said to me, but that is sort of the feeling, right? We all stand upon someone's shoulders, right? And if you make it personal within your family, the experiences that my grandfather had, and then that my father had, then that I had, it's very similar because you run into things, and then when you sit down and talk to those who are closest to you, they can give you an insight because they've done it first or they've experienced it first. And so that sort of struck, like you said, a chord even with me just growing up. And I just feel that way about things. And when I was writing that particular line, Major's character is trying to figure out his place in the world, and he's gone through this arc with his family, mother, father, and of course Aklilu, Barkat Abdi's character. And then now there's this new life brought into the family, this little girl sitting there, and he's trying to make sense of that. And that's when he talks about that, he was first. And so he's now experienced some things, some uncomfortable, some challenges. And we don't know if the little girl is on the spectrum. Remember, that was part of the story. So he's just standing there and he's doing his best to figure out how to be a good big brother to his sister.
Oh man, I it, sorry, I don't know why, because like the movie itself, like I said, very, very great. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but that line, that's what I left walking away from, because I mean, that final scene. Wait, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil, but that final scene, it's like, I don't know, God, it hits you right. It hits you right where it hurts, but like in a very good way. And so I honestly, I that's why I just wanted to know, because I was kind of just like left kind of like holding my heart a bit, thinking, man, I feel like I need to call my dad, or I need to call my sister or something like that. It's a very powerful moment, honestly.
We
Um,
appreciate that. Well, that's why we tell our stories, to touch people, right?
exactly, exactly. I do want to bring up legacies with father and grandfather at some point, but before we go there, Barcati's role in the film, did you write that for him in mind? Because when I was watching, I couldn't hold on, I have it written down. Akilu, how do you pronounce it
Klilu,
again?
Klilu.
Aklilu. Like,
Yes,
did you write the role with him in mind by chance?
yes, I did. I was hoping we would be able to cast him. So he was what was in my head when I was writing. Yes.
How much convincing did it take to for him to get for him to hop on, or was it just like, hey man, can you be in this movie? All right, when and where?
Not exactly. It once again, the casting director, I have to give credit. The entire cast was put together by Lisa Hamill. She did a great job casting the picture, and she just reached out to his agent, sent the script. He read the script, and he actually called me and said he would love to play the role if I'd like to have him. And I said, well, I wrote it for you, so I assume I'd like to have you.
Oh, so it's just like all the pieces falling into place. Like everything worked out perfectly.
It did. We got everyone we wanted, and it was, somehow the script touched them. One thing I was told, and I don't think he'll mind me sharing this with you, is Rory Cochrane. as you know, he's very picky about roles. He what I was told, and I believe it because I was told directly by him and his wife actually read the script and one night and said to him, Rory, I think you should play this role. And so his wife got him to read the screenplay. It was sent to him by his agent, but the wife actually read the script. And then he read it and said, yeah, I think I'd like doing this. So he came on board.
The scene with Tyson, Bobby, Akil,
Aklilu, yeah.
Aklilu. I'm sorry, as you can tell by my appearance, that I can't say those words properly.
And nobody can say that name. But except Tyson had no problem. Did you notice his mother struggling?
He said it. I'm
that was part of it. That was part of it. They clicked instantly. That's what I love. Aklilu.
Oh my God. I'm sitting here. I'm like, Tyson, Major, how are you? You want to know what? I'm just going to leave that alone. I don't know how he did it. But one thing I want to say, for those of you that have seen the movie, and I know you've seen the movie, you made it. The scene in the river at night with Tyson, Klilu, and Bobby. Sorry. That we all know it's a feel good story, but at the same time, I'm like, come on, spoiler. But no, it's a very well directed film, and I think you have done a truly phenomenal job. One, depicting autism in a very, it's already realistic, but I like the subtlety. Subtlety is something that I feel like with these types of characters are always lost, because, you have people like Dustin Hoffman with Rain Man, like I said, even Sean Penn with I Am Sam, Tom Hanks with Forrest Gump. But I love that you masterfully crafted a character with the help of Major, the subtlety that comes with autism, not necessarily the overt nature of it, but the underlying aspects, which, nothing but praise. But of course, but one of the major themes that that I've seen with this, that I'm now going to kind of redirect, is it's a lot of things was Tyson's place in the world as well as a legacy, because he has this sister, and now he's trying to figure out where she's going to fit into all this and how he's going to kind of like help her. And it really did bring up the concept of legacy to me. And even you as a creative, with your lineage of phenomenal shows in the 90s and early 2000s, and even your legacy as a filmmaker, we've talked about how you've managed to pull inspiration from your two sisters with Sister, you and your friend Tyrone with Kenan and Kel. But there's an aspect to your life that I don't think a lot of people really know, and that is your own lineage. Like, your great-grandfather was the first mayor in a city in New York. Is that correct?
Yes. So my grandfather, not my great-grandfather, my grandfather,
right,
became mayor of a small town in Bridgewater, New York, and he happened to be a person who happened to be African American, and he was voted into office. And it's an interesting story because the family, my mother's family, they were actually the only Black family in the town. And what had happened is the election was being held, and it's the kind of rural town where when it's time for an election, people generally have a consensus, kind of like what you want in the House of Representatives. You have a consensus before you vote that it's going to work. And so they sort of have a consensus who's going to be mayor, and then they all go and do their civic duty and vote, and then that person becomes mayor. This particular year, two different gentlemen wanted to be mayor. They both desired to be the mayor of the town. And that was unusual for this town. And so it started to divide the town, because one side is running and the other side is running, and that's not kind of how they did it in this place. And people got turned off, a lot of them. And so when it came to go and vote, without this being a plan, this was just completely organic. People started writing in my grandfather's name, like, who in town does everyone respect and like? And it happened to be my grandfather. And so he got woken up very early in the morning and informed that he had been elected mayor. And I think he got something like 76% of the vote, all write-in votes. Imagine that.
76%?
I believe that was the number.
Damn, your
All
grandfather was popular.
well, it wasn't a
Wow.
big town, but I don't want to give you the impression it was millions of votes cast, but it was a small town. But he ended up with about 76% of the vote. And here's what was interesting. One person ran as a Democrat, the other one ran as an independent. My grandfather was elected as a Republican, and he actually got a letter from Richard Nixon prior to Richard Nixon resigning, congratulating him on his Republican win as mayor in this town.
Ooh.
So,
Oh, I mean,
and and then here's what's interesting about it. So he was mayor and he did his job. When he became mayor, what made the news is that it was a write-in vote and this man won with 76%. They never mentioned his ethnicity. After he did his stint as mayor, and he told the folks that, I don't want to be mayor again. I'm busy. I've got he was a carpenter and grandchildren, what have you, and told them that he appreciated it, but he, would rather not be mayor again. And so they voted for someone else, after his time in office. Well, that made the news also, except now they made it a racial thing. They said first Black mayor ever elected ousted after one term in office. And that so hurt my grandfather that after the 2 years went by, he said, okay, now I do want to be mayor. And he was elected again, and he served as mayor for the rest of his life.
oh, okay. I don't want to say he ran simply as like a, hold on, not what's the word? Not like what's the term for when it's like, oh yeah, you think that? I'll show you. Like because I have because people that know me know that I made 2 short films when I was in school. Spite. That's the word, spite. I don't want to say he ran out of spite. Maybe a little bit, but like not a lot.
No,
So
no,
like
no, he did not.
that's
He didn't run out of spite. He ran to correct the record. He
that's
wasn't out, he wasn't ousted. And the fact that they made it racial, that bothered him. That, I was just a mayor who got elected with 76% of a write-in vote, and they didn't mention my color. But when I don't want to be mayor anymore, they twisted the truth and say I was ousted. I wasn't ousted, I didn't run. And that did not sit well with him. So he decided to run a second time. And of course, everyone voted for him, and he was mayor until he died.
honestly, that is so freaking cool. Simply because it's like I like his dedication that he had, not just to his own name, but clearly to the people around him as well, because he wouldn't have stepped in
Legacy.
office to begin with if he
It's what
knew
you
that he
mentioned. It was legacy. It bothered him that his grandchildren were upset and got teased at school about it. And so it was about legacy, as you had mentioned.
yeah. And honestly, seeing like the path that your family and you have laid for yourselves in terms of just you both have helped your own people, whether it be through close family relations, your friends, or just people in your neighborhood. It's really interesting to see that you both have contributed some truly phenomenal things, not just for yourselves, but for the people around you. And I gotta know, like reflecting on your career thus far and reflecting on your life, like are you proud of the work that you've done? Would you consider that you're happy with how a lot of your life and a lot of the work that you've done is played out?
Well, happiness comes, um, I don't think, just from the work. Happiness comes because you're filled with joy just by living the life that you want to live, right? At least that's how I was raised. And so I'm always happy. And I am grateful that the dream that I had starting at 7.5 years old when my paternal grandfather took me to my first film, I came home and told my mom I wanted to make movies. I had seen my first movie and I was so impacted by it that I wanted to do that. And so that became, sort of my driving force as a little kid, that even sometimes even if I didn't speak about it all the time. So that was my dream. And so to be able to be in a position where I can do television shows and make films, I'm beyond happy. That's just living in a dream world for me. But you don't do these things alone. The support of family and friends and my grandfather, which is very interesting because he hadn't seen a movie in probably 2 decades and took me to see a film one evening and then never went to a movie theater again. And I asked him one day, why did you take me to the movie that evening? I called him Papa. And he said, I don't hardly know. It just occurred to me. He said, it just occurred to me to take you to see a movie. And, that snowballs. And then you get the support of, family and friends and other wonderful people who, for example, Tyson's Run and doing a snowy day in Oakland. I met a wonderful executive producer, John Capetta, with his new film company called Planet Nine Productions, who read my screenplays and saw in them what I saw in them, and then helped facilitate the production of those projects. And he's a family man with a vision, and just working with really good people, just different producers. Eric Upshur, I can name so many, Deanna Shapiro, and working with Claudia Zavaios. She's inspirational. As a matter of fact, she did such a good job in a film we did called Day of Days, where she played opposite Tom Skerritt, 2-character film that they both won Best Actor awards in the Women's International Film Festival. Essentially did me a favor to be in Tyson's Run playing a supporting role, but we have something upcoming, which is called A Lawyer, the Devil, 3 Priests, and a Nun, which is a sort of semi-quirky horror noir type film that has a Peruvian based true story attached to it. And so it just sort of made sense. But it's what you were talking about, working with people who, help you become successful in your endeavor. It doesn't mean you're a success, in quotes, but successful in your endeavor to do things. And so it's not a straight path, but as long as you keep your eye on the target, you'll eventually get there, even if you have to go left, right, or under, or above, or around something. And so you mentioned happy. I wake up every day happy. And because I have the opportunity each day to continue to pursue my dream. And my dream was always to create TV shows and films. And so, what's not to love about that?
Honestly, nothing much, man. That's what I hope to do at some point in my career too, because that's my end game, to write and direct. Because I honestly believe there is no finer joy than creating just a good story you can share with everybody. And honestly, it has been such a huge privilege to be able to speak with you today. I am wholeheartedly honored, and even humbled too, because your film, for someone who, like I said, is already on sort of a spectrum itself, to actually see it portrayed in a way that was never over the top. I know I'm repeating myself, subtlety here, subtlety there. It was amazing. That film had an impact on me. And we talk about legacy. I mean, the amount of people I know who are in parts of their career they are now simply because they were inspired by In Living Color, with Sister, Kenan and Kel, who were just inspired by your work. It's a truly beautiful thing. And don't worry, I won't take up much more of your time. I will, however, ask just 2 more questions, more or less pretty much the same. You talked about an upcoming work. Can you, which is a nun, a werewolf, a priest, walk into a bar? Oh, what was it called again?
It's called A Lawyer, the Devil, 3 Priests, and a Nun. ... Walk into a bar.
But when can we expect to see it? Oh, first, are we allowed to know any details about it? And 2, when can we see it released?
Well, we're in the last stages of putting the production together. Everything got slowed down with the strikes and things like that. But if things go according to plan, we hope to be rolling cameras this spring. So we'll see. Things always shift in the entertainment business, as you know, with production. But that's the project that's on the front burner. There's a couple of other things, but that one's on the front burner, and so hopefully it'll take off. But I don't want to spoil it. I'll leave it at the title, and then folks can just check it out.
Probably for the best, all things considered. The imagination is a truly wonderful thing. And second to last one, there's a bunch of samurai art behind you, and especially on the door too. Now I'm wondering, is that just something that you're a fan of, samurai, or is that maybe leading to something else that may or may not be coming up?
That's a good eye. Look at you, paint. No wonder you're directing pictures and looking to do films. You have a discerning eye. That is actually a project that we are deep in development on. We're actually taking some meaningful meetings with the studios, and it's a little thing we like to call Yasuke, Soul of a Samurai. And so we're pretty far down the road on that project. And you might not know this about me, but I spent 5 years living in Japan studying various martial arts, including Iaido, which is samurai sword drawing, meaning from the scabbard, not making pictures. And so it's a project I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and it's coming together quite nicely. I don't have a lot to say about it, but it's real. And we're getting closer and closer to a green light on that project.
If that story is what I think it's about, I am so absolutely excited for that. I have always been a fan of samurai films, and I'm also a fan of history too. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that get made. So I'll be keeping a close eye on it. And my last question would essentially just be, and this is what I ask normally every director. Let's just say you were given a blank check. Just, blank check, full creative control. What would you want to make?
Well, here's the thing. The stories that I write are the ones that I want to make. So, but I will say this. So, for example, A Lawyer, the Devil, Three Priests, and a Nun. I'm so passionate about that project because it's such a unique story. So I'd take that check and I'd make that movie, but I'd take that check and I'd make Yasuke with it. And each script that I write is the one that I'm in love with at the time that I'm writing it. And then once it's written, it's a film that I want to make, right? So that blank check would be for each of the projects. And I'm writing a screenplay right now that, I eventually intend to make. And hopefully that check would be big enough so I could make my slate. That's what I would say. This is my slate. These are my stories as what I am doing right now. I'm working my way through a slate. Day of Days was on a slate. That's the one with Claudia Zavaios and Tom Skerritt. And then A Snowy Day in Oakland was on a slate. And then the next one up, Tyson's Run. And so I'm literally methodically going through a list of stories that just swirl in my head. I get them down on paper so that I have the screenplay, and I continue writing the stories that I have sort of lined up, and then I work my way through. And sometimes I have to jump, ahead and make this one and then go back and make the other one. But that's really what's happening. And the next two up are literally A Lawyer, the Devil, Three Priests, and a Nun, and Yasuke, Soul of a Samurai. And then I'll move into the other projects. There's a Western that's being shopped right now, and then we move into each and every story. So that blank check, if it's going to be magical anyway, so maybe it's the blank check where you can write it, and then once you do it, it becomes live again, and then you write another. And if not, then I'd figure out how to make that one check cover at least the slate as it exists right now, and then I'm sure something else will occur to me.
That is a solid freaking answer. Thank you so much. Please, to everyone watching, go see Tyson's Run, which is currently available on physical media as well as VOD, and will be making its way to Netflix when again?
On February 28th, 2024.
Check it out. I promise you will not be disappointed. Kim Bass, thank you for hopping on. Have a good rest of your day.
Noah, it was an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to seeing your films because I know you're gonna do well. So I'll be sitting there and saying, he interviewed me one day when you're standing up there with your Oscar. All right, man, you have yourself an awesome day. Thank
You
you.
too. Bye.
Appreciate it. Take care. Bye.